Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off today's presentation on sedition laws. This is the first slide, so I want to warmly welcome you all and introduce our topic. Today, we'll explore what sedition laws are, their historical context, and their impact on society. We'll also look at some key examples and discuss ongoing debates surrounding these laws. So, let's get started and dive into the world of sedition laws. Let's take a closer look at Section 124A of the IPC, which specifically addresses seditious behavior. Now, to understand what sedition truly means, we can refer to Stephen's commentaries on the laws of England. He defined sedition as behavior that aims, or naturally, results in the unlawful display of dissatisfaction with the government or the existing social order. Essentially, it's about actions or words that challenge authority or societal stability. What's important to note here is that seditious behavior isn't limited to just words. It can include deeds or even writings that promote discontent or rebellion. In addition to this, India's legal framework includes the Prevention of Publication of Objectionable Matter Act of 1976. This law was incorporated into the 9th Schedule through the Constitution's 40th Amendment, providing an additional layer of regulation against objectionable content. All of these laws together form the backbone of how sedition and related offenses are addressed legally, which ties into the broader theme of maintaining law and order while respecting freedom of expression. On this slide, we see that sedition provisions are embedded in several key laws, including the Indian Penal Code of 1860, specifically Section 124A, the Code of Criminal Procedure of 1973 under Section 95, the Seditious Meetings Act of 1911, and the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, particularly Section 2(0), Roman 3. A common thread across all these laws is the concept of disaffection, a term we inherited from British rule. Disaffection essentially refers to a feeling of discontent or dissatisfaction, but more specifically, it's understood as a sentiment that can only exist between the ruler and the ruled, meaning, for example, that the ruler must be recognized as such, and the discontent must be directed against the authority of the state. Now, when the draft constitution was being formulated, the framers considered including sedition and public order as reasons to restrict the fundamental right to free speech under Article 13. However, in the final version of the Constitution, sedition was removed from the list of exceptions to free speech in Article 19(2). This change reflects a nuanced balance between maintaining order and protecting individual freedoms. Understanding the history of sedition helps us see how these laws and concepts evolved, shaping the way dissent and expression are regulated in our country today. It's a topic that ties directly into our broader discussion about the tensions between state authority and individual rights. In 1870, Sec. 124A of the Indian Penal Code was enacted, and it served as a rather harsh tool used by the colonial authorities to suppress anti-colonial sentiments. It was designed to target those who challenged British rule, and in fact, many of the most prominent leaders of the independence movement, including Gandhi and Tilak, faced trial under this very section. Now, when we look at the broader context of free speech in India, it's interesting to note that during the debates in the Constituent Assembly, the word sedition was notably excluded from what eventually became Article 19(2). This was a conscious decision. The framers debated extensively about the scope and limits of free speech, but they decided not to include sedition explicitly as a ground for restricting speech. Initially, in the draft discussions, sedition was actually listed as one of the reasons or grounds for imposing restrictions on speech. But after deliberation, it was removed from the final wording. This highlights a key tension, the balance between maintaining order and protecting individual freedoms. Connecting this to our overall theme, it shows how the concept of sedition has historically been a tool used both to suppress dissent and as a point of debate in defining free speech's boundaries. It's a reminder of how language and legal tools shape the rights we have today. As we all know, most of the laws in place in India were given to us by the British, and sedition legislation is one of them. In the year 1837, Thomas Macaulay created the Sedition Law as an infraction in Clause 113 of the draft Indian Penal Code. The growth in rebellion by Indian revolutionaries against the company overlords was the basis for its inclusion in the draft. When the British realized that Indians were promoting hatred against them, they understood that they needed a legislation to put a stop to it. The Law of Sedition, on the other hand, was not included in the original Indian Penal Code of 1860. Instead, the British government modified the Indian Penal Code in 1870 to include it. This history highlights why India has sedition laws, originally imposed by the British to control dissent and rebellion, and which continue to influence our legal framework today. In 1897, the first of Tilak's trials took place, marking a significant moment in his life and in the struggle for Indian independence. He was held responsible for an allegorical article published in his newspaper, the Kesari, where he was the proprietor, publisher, and editor. The article was titled Shivaji's Utterances, and it discussed Shivaji, the legendary Maratha hero, supposedly assassinating Afzal Khan for the greater good. Now, this piece was seen as provocative, because it was interpreted as endorsing violence against the British authorities. Interestingly, just a week after the publication, 2 British officers were killed at a reception celebrating Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, an event Tilak himself attended. This connection added fuel to the charges against him. The trial was overseen by Judge Stachy, who was known for his anti-native stance and for misleading the jury, which raised questions about the fairness of the proceedings. Ultimately, the Privy Council upheld the jury's guilty verdict, confirming Tilak's guilt. However, his sentence was later remitted under the condition that he wouldn't promote dissent against the government through actions or speech. This trial is really important because it shows how the British authorities tried to suppress nationalist voices and how Tilak's activism was seen as a threat to their rule. It also highlights the beginning of a series of legal battles that Tilak faced, which only strengthened his resolve and his role as a leader in the Indian independence movement. In 1908, Tilak was prosecuted again for sedition, which was a significant moment in his struggle against British rule. This trial came right after another violent incident involving attacks on British Indians. Specifically, there was a bomb explosion that was actually aimed at a sessions judge in Muzaffarpur. Unfortunately, the bomb unintentionally killed the wife and child of an English barrister. It's also important to note the trial's context. Most of the jurors were not native Marathi speakers, and the majority were English speakers. This highlights the cultural and linguistic divide in the legal process at the time. Ultimately, Tilak was sentenced to 6 years in jail, along with 6 years of supervised release afterward. This case illustrates the escalating tensions and the British authorities' efforts to suppress nationalist movements. It also shows how Tilak's activism was seen as a threat, leading to harsh penalties. All of these points connect to the larger theme of resistance and repression during India's fight for independence. In 1916, Tilak faced his 3rd trial for sedition, which was a significant moment in his activism. During this trial, he made 3 speeches where he criticized the bureaucracy, and these speeches became the basis for his conviction. The court found him guilty of attributing dishonest motives to the government, which was seen as a serious charge at the time. However, it's interesting to note that the judge, Justice Batchelor, clarified that Tilak's statements amounted to inciting disapproval rather than disaffection. This distinction is crucial because disaffection implies a desire to overthrow or challenge the government, whereas disapproval is simply criticizing or expressing dissatisfaction. The judge also argued that supporting Swarajya, or self-rule, could be considered seditious if it provoked disaffection. This raises an important question. How can one advocate for a new system without stirring up dissatisfaction with the current one? It shows the fine line between peaceful protest and rebellion, and how these legal distinctions played a role in shaping India's independence movement. This episode highlights the complex relationship between freedom of speech and political activism during that era, which ties into the broader struggle for self-rule that we're exploring in this presentation. In 1922, Mohandas Gandhi and Shankarlal Banker faced trial under Section 124A, which deals with sedition. They were accused of publishing 3 articles in the newspaper Young India, titled Tampering with Loyalty, The Puzzle and Its Solution, and Shaking the Manes. These writings were seen as provocative, but as Noorani notes, the trial didn't divert Gandhi from his chosen path. Instead, it only showcased his virtues, his dignity and his ability to express himself with clarity and conviction. Gandhi chose to plead guilty and openly urged the judge to punish him to the full extent of the law. He candidly expressed that he felt morally compelled to challenge the existing system, that preaching dissatisfaction had become his passion, and he was proud to carry forward Tilak's legacy of defiance. Judge Strangeman sentenced him to 6 years in prison. Interestingly, rather than suppressing dissent, Gandhi's arrest actually increased his popularity, turning him into a symbol of resistance. This episode highlights how his willingness to face punishment strengthened his moral authority and the broader independence movement. As we come to the final slide, I want to emphasize that the law of sedition has long been shrouded in uncertainty and inconsistency since its origins in the Star Chamber in England. Over generations, those in power have intentionally kept its scope vague, effectively ensuring they have a tool to suppress any speech that challenges their interests. This deliberate ambiguity serves to give those in authority a lot of leeway in how they interpret and apply the law. It's crucial to remember that without liberty, democracy loses its meaning. When sedition is defined and enforced primarily by police and governments, it can become a tool for denying fundamental freedoms. That's why we must approach the term sedition with caution. It's a powerful concept that can easily be misused to silence dissent. In the context of our overall discussion, understanding these nuances helps us see how legal tools meant to protect society can sometimes threaten the very democratic values they're supposed to uphold. Thank you.